Welcome to MarcusG.tv. I'm Chef Marcus Guiliano. I'm a chef on a mission. Today's mission is non-GMO. Non-GMO can be very confusing. Here's an article I pulled up from the San Francisco Chronicle. This example is giving milk. This example is using milk. I don't recommend drinking dairy milk. I do like nut milks, almond milk, rice milk, flax milk is one of my favorites. So this is just an example. Don't think I'm advocating dairy, but non-GMO milk labels angers some farmers. So here's the issue with the non-GMO label that you're seeing everywhere now. This is a massively growing industry. So when a company comes out and labels a brand non-GMO or GMO-free, it makes the other brands look bad. And now the conventional farmers, which the non-GMO people are conventional farmers as well, they don't need to be organic. It's making these other labels look bad. So in the case of milk, if you were to walk up into the milk aisle and you were to see all these non-organic milks, but one of them said non-GMO, not fed GMO crops or this or that, not use bovine growth hormone, GMO-free, you'd be like, oh, this milk must be healthy. This milk must be healthier. When in fact, they're not using GMOs. The other guys are using GMOs. So yes, there is a certain healthier aspect to that. But the guys who aren't taking the extra time or taking the extra money or caring, and they're feeding their cows GMO corn or bovine growth hormone, are now up in arms because now they're sort of being called out on the shelf. So they're saying, well, this is not fair because these guys are making a claim and it's making our product look bad. The same thing happened with apples and alar. Apple growers used to put down on their packages non-alar or alar not used in this crop, or we don't use alar. Alar is a very toxic chemical that they use in apple growers. This happened in Colorado actually in the late 80s. So now the apple growers that are spraying alar, this toxic chemical all over their crops, are complaining and saying, well, this is differentiating our crop and it's hurting our sales. And we can't allow these people to label something that could be healthier, that is healthier. So that's why that law was passed. There's lots of laws all across the country that allow or don't allow certain products to identify themselves as a healthier product because the other people have such a stronghold who are doing all the bad things to our food. So here's just another case of how the people that are using GMOs, that don't care about what they're giving their cattle for milk, are now up in arms because another farmer's not giving GMOs. So there's a new food category that's gaining popularity with shoppers, but that's also becoming an enemy of farmers, both conventional and organic. Now the side of this that the organic people don't like is the organic people, to be certified organic, you're not allowed to use GMOs. So they're not using GMOs, but they're not allowed to use pesticides and other chemicals as well. So the GMO guy, the anti-GMO guy, is smack in the middle. He's not doing what the guy's doing who's using GMOs, but he's not doing what the guy's doing who's using organics. Because he's still spraying pesticides, chemicals, fertilizers, things like that. So he's right in the middle, and the average consumer doesn't know that. The average consumer walks and says, oh, this is non-GMO. That's great. This must be like organic. And just because you see the non-GMO label, that means it's far from organic. Now every case is different, but typically it's far from organic. They're basically just saying we're not using GMO crops in our product. Consumer interest in non-GMO foods, those without genetically modified organisms, is growing according to market research. Sales are expected to grow 65% from $200 billion in 2014 to $330 billion in 2019. But even though people are willing to pay more for the label due to fear of the unknown and unproven, they're saying, potential consequences of consuming GMOs, the designation could end up meaning little when it comes to their health and that of the environment. So, they're saying that there's unproven things about GMO. There are a lot of unproven things, because GMOs are so new and they've never done any long-term studies on GMOs, but the studies that are being done with rats and animals are proving major consequences to the health. And of course, everything has been demonized by Monsanto, all these studies done, because they don't want that information out there. And Monsanto's been accused of knowing very well what's happening in laboratory rats and they're fed GMOs. The Chronicle reported Wednesday that Clover Stornetta Farms of Petaluma would be adding a non-GMO certification to its conventional milk in 2017, meaning it would require dairy farmers use GMO-free feed with its conventional herd. The move upset both organic and conventional farmers, as well as a few agricultural scientists. So let me explain how this basically works. When you see a label of milk or dairy in the store, it's not one farm producing it. When you see eggs, when you see all these things, that's just the label of the manufacturer, of the co-op, of the producer, of the packer. So I don't know who Clover Farm is, but it sounds like that they buy from a lot of other farms, and family-run farms. This is how they get away with this lingo. Oh, it's from family-run farms. These conglomerates do buy from independents. Tyson, the massive food conglomerate, buys from all independent farms. So for them to say, well, we buy it from independent farms, or we source from independent farms, is true. But some of these independent farms are massive, and they're not doing the right thing by any means. And to play the game with Tyson, or with probably Clover Stornetta, you've got to play the game, and you've got to be up with your production. And that way you do that is by adding chemicals, adding GMOs, adding fertilizers, and doing all this stuff, because you have to come in at a certain price point for these guys. So yeah, you might have several hundred acres and raising all this beef, but then you're selling it off to Tyson, to their feedlot, or in this case, your milk is going to this co-op or this company. It's just being mixed in with everybody else's milk. It's not from one farm. People think they're going to buy a container of milk in the store that is from one farm. It's typically not like that, unless you're paying a lot more money and you actually know the label and this. But they're going to paint a big picture, and they're like, oh, from grass pastures, or from this and that, for local milk, this and that. So Clover probably has some of their farmers that they buy from that aren't using GMOs. Or they're going to go to some farmers that aren't using GMOs. They're not changing what they're really doing as far as production. They're just sourcing things from people who are doing something that's a little better. And now they're making their own label. They're not going to mix it in with the other milk. So don't think that Clover's some great farm and that they're going to have one pasture with feeding GMO crops and the other one that's going to be non-GMO crops. The organic farmers who objected to the label feel that the non-GMO designation takes away from the organic certification, which I totally agree. Because, you, like I said, you can have all the other added chemicals and stuff in the non-GMO that people just, it's very misleading to say, oh, this is non-GMO, I'm eating so healthy. It's just one aspect of eating healthier. Consumers can feel confident that all milk is GMO-free. GMOs aren't in milk, regardless of GMO or non-GMO feed, tweeted Cindy Sorensen of the Midwest Dairy Association, who represents Minnesota farmers, in response to this article. So what Sorensen is saying is, milk is not genetically engineered, and neither are dairy cows. And she has a good point there. They're not. It's what the cows are eating are just genetically modified foods. Or if they're getting bovine growth hormone, that's something that's genetically modified. So the milk itself is not being genetically modified, neither is the cow. So now this person's saying, well, gee, now this is really misleading, because consumers just assume that across the board that milk is. You'd never go into the store and say, oh, this milk is genetically modified. But things that went in to make the milk and grow the cow were genetically modified. So this is the other side of the story that, yeah, most consumers just don't really know and would never assume that, hey, they're putting something that could potentially harm my health or the environment into my products. The whole GMO labeling movement has really put a damper on the organic movement, said Rebecca Thistlewat, author and consultant, who previously ran a farm in Watsonville, Oregon. There are a lot of consumers who falsely believe that when you buy non-GMO, it's meeting certain value standards that have been around sustainability, but without the organic price tag. Now, I totally agree with that 100%. Like I've said, unlike the feed used in the production of milk, non-GMO growers can apply conventional pesticides, herbicides to their crops, and usually ones that are more toxic than the Roundup used for crops, for the Roundup Ready crops. So, my suggestion is, when you buy something, when you see that non-organic label, or I'm sorry, non-GMO label, GMO-free label, is you buy something that's automatically is certified organic as well. Now, organic certification, like I said earlier, requires the use of non-GMO. You can't use GMOs to get an organic certification. However, when you see that non-GMO label on an organic brand, it just means that organic brand has gone one step above and actually getting their product tested, randomly tested from one of those non-GMO organizations out there, saying, okay, well, we want to really make sure it's not, our crops aren't getting cross-contaminated, our product doesn't have the infiltration of GMOs. So we're going one step further, and we're going to get this certified. So that's really what you're looking for. Just because you're buying organic doesn't mean there's a guarantee there's no pesticides as well. People think, oh, organic is totally free and this and that. Things are cross-contaminated. Where the farm is, what the neighbor's doing, GMO crops get contaminated. Things do get contaminated. It's just the reality of what's happening. But the reason why you're buying organic is because you're buying something that definitely has less, way less residues, if any, and you're paying a farmer to keep his land sustainable and keep moving in the next direction. So maybe the guy's neighbor who is spraying these harmful chemicals, pesticides, herbicides, will all of a sudden say, wow, my neighbor's making money and not spraying this stuff. Maybe I can convert my farm too. And of course, the organic market is growing by leaps and bounds, just like the non-GMO market. So a lot more farms are converting. So by buying organic, it's super, super important. Don't feel that you're getting ripped off, even though you'll see reports out there on the internet saying, you know, 5 myths of organic food, and there's still this and that on it, and this and that. That stuff is being over-exaggerated typically because they want you to feel that you don't need to pay the money for organic to switch back to the conventional so they can keep selling their chemicals and their pesticides and all that kind of stuff to farmers. I'm Chef Marcus Guiliano. Thanks for watching. If you like my videos, please hit like, subscribe to my channel, head over to my website, chefonamission.com, sign up for my email list, and thanks for listening.